Stories are the most powerful thing on earth. They are literally life and death. Wars are waged based on the story of who is the hero and who is the villain. You are the result of a story your parents told each other, the one-night stand, the soulmate, and friends who became so much more. Life and death. So wouldn't you like to understand them better, these stories? How Story Works, an elegant guide to the craft of storytelling by Lonnie Diane Rich, demystifies stories and helps you understand why you love what you love, why you hate what you hate, and why prologues are almost always a bad idea. How Story Works by Lonnie Diane Rich. Available on Amazon in ebook, audiobook, and paperback form. Get your copy today.
Welcome to Still Pretty, a Willow the Bad Man Flayer podcast from Chipperish Media. I'm film scholar running on pure fury, Noelle LaCroix.
And I'm story expert and keeper of darkness, Lonnie Diane Rich, and we're here today to talk about Villains, the 20th episode of Season 6. Villains aired on May 14th, 2002, and was written by Marty Noxon and directed by David Solomon.
Still Pretty is a fully spoiled, full-spectrum Buffy podcast, so if you haven't seen all of the show, go take care of that, and we'll just sit here arguing the merits of Ferris Matthew versus Broadway Matthew.
I'll help, but I'm helping Willow. Let's go on patrol. In Villains, Xander meets the paramedics as they come to get Buffy. Upstairs in their bedroom, Willow cries over Tara's body and calls for Osiris, demanding that he bring Tara back. But Osiris says it's a natural death, and that's not his business.
She is taken by natural order. It is done.
No, there has to be a way.
It is done.
In jail, Andrew persists in his oblivion while Jonathan tells him the truth. Warren left them, and he's not coming back. Warren, meanwhile, is at a demon bar bragging about how he killed the Slayer, but the demons laugh at him. It was just on the news. The Slayer survived, and now she's going to be coming after Warren. At the magic box, a calm and determined Willow busts in. Anya tries to talk her down, but Willow freezes her, then pulls all the dark arts books from the shelves and pulls the ink into her body, making her eyes and hair black.
That's better.
At the Summers house, Dawn comes home from school. The house is empty. She goes upstairs and looks in the room, eventually finding Tara's body. Meanwhile, Warren has managed to find Rack's place, and he demands to be dosed up on magic to protect him from the Slayer. Rack tells him the Slayer is the least of Warren's problems. A powerful witch wants him dead, and she is running on pure fury. At the hospital, the doctors and nurses are working on Buffy when Willow walks in. She makes them all leave, then pulls the bullet out of Buffy's body and magically repairs her. Buffy wakes up, and Willow says they have to go.
Why? It's time to find Warren.
Warren gets on a bus out of town, and Xander drives while Willow directs him where to go, and Buffy tries to talk Willow out of killing Warren. Willow doesn't listen. She magically takes the wheel and overtakes the bus, stopping it and demanding that Warren come out. He does. Willow strangles him until his eye pops out. It's a robot version of Warren. Willow is not pleased. Buffy tries to talk to Willow, and Willow tells her that Warren killed Tara. And now she's going to kill Warren.
Well, if you do this, you let Warren destroy you too.
You said it yourself, Will. The magic's too strong. There's no coming back from it.
I'm not coming back.
Willow disappears, and Buffy and Xander return home to find Dawn sitting alone with Tara's body.
I didn't want to leave her alone.
Buffy and Xander decide to go to the magic box and get a locating spell to find Willow. Dawn wants to go too, but Buffy says no. Dawn says she wants to go to Spike's then. Xander objects, but Buffy says he won't hurt Dawn. When they get there, however, they find Clem, who's staying there while Spike's gone. Spike, meanwhile, is somewhere in Africa, working a deal with a demon.
You never endure the trials required to grant your request.
Do your worst. But when I win, I want what I came here for.
At the magic box, Anya tells Buffy and Xander what happened and reveals that she's back in the vengeance business. She agrees to use her powers to track Willow. In the woods, Willow tracks Warren. He buries an axe in her back, but it doesn't stop her. He throws all his various tricks at her, but nothing works. She talks to him about what he's done and shows him Katrina. He shows no remorse. Willow takes a bullet and slowly pushes it through him as he screams, explaining to him what a bullet does, how it destroys everything. She stitches his mouth shut to keep him from screaming while she talks, and then interrupts his begging
Bored now.
by flaying him alive. Buffy, Xander, and Anya arrive just in time to see that Willow has killed Warren.
Willow, what did you do? One down.
All right. So, oh my God, Noelle, here we are at the end of season 6, getting deep, deep, deep into the darkness and villains. Kind of a dark episode. What did you think?
I forgot how fucking good this episode is. Oh my God, you guys, this episode is so good. So good. So good. And I do not feel bad for Warren for one split second. And I cannot wait to dive into that with you.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. There's some really interesting questions raised by this episode. This is one of those episodes that I always forget. Like I always think we're just going straight to 2 to go and then, getting into grave and everything. I always forget villains. But villains is like a very necessary kind of transitional, this is the transition of Willow into that darkness. And there are so many questions about, what is quote unquote the right thing to do? And then who cares about what the right thing is? There's a certain point where the right thing is so irrelevant, it doesn't even matter. And that's, I think, the point that Willow got to in here. It's never been one of my favorite episodes. It is good. I think that I just don't enjoy watching it for a lot of reasons that we're going to be talking about, not the least of which is the horrifying aspect of this episode. But I mean, first, I think, we got to talk about like one of the major themes of this season of Buffy in general, the idea of vengeance versus justice and the natural cost of vengeance. I mean, we have had this discussion a lot this season, along with the human evil versus demonic evil. I think that we've kind of like capped all of that up. But we get to the point where it becomes very textual in this episode. I mean, Buffy very calmly states like the correct position on this.
Being a slayer doesn't give me a license to kill. Warren's human. So the human world has its own rules for dealing with people like him.
So, Buffy basically says, this is it. This is the line we draw. The human justice system may not be a good justice system, but it's a system and it's not my business. And we kind of get that. We get that from Osiris in the beginning of the episode. This is not my territory. The natural human death, right? And Buffy says, this is not my territory. I am the one that kills the demons, to protect people. And also, let's not forget, Buffy is about protection, not about justice. Buffy, as soon as somebody doesn't hurt people anymore, as soon as Spike gets a chip, that she doesn't kill them. She only kills them when she's preventing damage to humans, when she's preventing harm. So that's kind of an interesting thing too, because Buffy at her core doesn't even really, like, she as a character and what she does doesn't even really like wrestle with the question of justice versus vengeance. That's all external to Buffy.
Yeah, and I find it incredibly frustrating in that Buffy is still very much in this like Slayer space. I mean, of course she is. She's the Slayer. But we've done this whole thing with Buffy kind of pushing back against the Watchers Council and the Slayers and like what this means. But here, in that scene with Dawn and Xander in the living room with Joyce's picture kind of pointedly in the background, I really enjoy. Buffy's like, I'm the Slayer, I don't kill. And I just want to be like, girl, no one is asking you to kill.
Yeah.
Both Xander and Dawn are like, look, the dude is dangerous. He is, as dangerous as anything that you have fought as the Slayer. And Buffy is so in her own perspective on this that it doesn't, to me, it doesn't come across as the quote unquote correct position. I believe Buffy that she believes it, but it seems very, it seems like she still kind of has this Watchers Council hat on in this moment. And it
A little bit.
doesn't
although her
particularly work
concern-
for me. Like,
yeah,
I don't
her
buy it.
Mm-hmm. Her concern to me does not seem to be for Warren. It seems to be for Willow. You know, that like it's somebody else's job to deal with Warren, you know, and that her concern is for Willow. The thing about Buffy that bothers me, and we're going to get into this a little bit, is just like how incredibly straightforward and matter of fact she is. And I do feel like, you know, even after everything she's been through, this is just a very like, you know, kind of out of the rule books Buffy, you know?
Yeah.
And it feels a little bit strange. This whole season, Buffy has been, you know, really robotic. We opened the season killing the Buffy bot, and we got the Buffy bot, you know, to a certain degree, you know, and this feels like more of that from her. And the idea, to me, it seems what she's saying is, I'm not going to let Willow lose herself by killing a human, you know, because if you look back, it was killing a human that sent Faith to the dark side, you know. Although Faith, I think, was pretty much headed there. She was on the dark side bus anyway.
Well, she was more nuanced in her.
Yeah.
She was more. Faith was more nuanced in her worldview than Buffy
Yes.
was. Buffy is very, very clear cut, and we see that really well, you know, portrayed here.
Yeah.
And Faith, whereas Faith, I think, had a much more flexible worldview when it comes to death and killing, and, you know, what that means in relation to being a slayer.
Right. I think what I would almost enjoy more here, especially because it's not just Willow that has endured a loss. Tara meant a lot to everybody. You know, Tara's loss is a big fucking deal, you know? I almost would rather have Buffy asking the question here, you know, instead of stating it from the rule book, being like, okay, you know, what is the right thing? But the only thing I like that her perspective is, I'm not going to let Willow destroy herself. I'm not going to let Willow lose herself, you know, in this, which I think is good. And that's the perspective that I want from Buffy here, because nobody should give a fuck about Warren at this point.
Yeah.
Like, Warren should get what he gets. Warren deserves, you know, whatever he gets. So I find it kind of an interesting thing. It's very much laid down as like, this is the way that it is, you know, this is how it is. And maybe in a certain sense, Buffy needs that in order to do what she does. Like, she needs to know that there are clear lines and clear rules, and that if she stays within this space, then she's okay. Like, maybe there's some of that, but I don't feel like we express that. Buffy just kind of stands there as a bot, you know, to spout this part of the argument. Rather than actually living it through her experience, which is something that I think we fail on in season 6 in general. But we'll get to that a little bit when we talk about Buffy as a character. One of the things about this particular episode that always throws like the rest of Buffy into like a stark relief for me is the horror aspect. I am not a fan of horror, as everybody knows. I tend to, after watching something truly horrifying, end up in the fetal position for a few hours. Buffy is ostensibly a horror show, but mostly, I mean, come on, you know, it's Buffy beating the hell out of big rubber snakes with arms, you know?
Is it a horror show?
I mean, ostensibly,
Is
it's
it, though?
vampires,
I don't know.
it's monsters. It doesn't have the aspect of horror for me, in that it doesn't scare me. It's not particularly gross. It's latex. It's costume horror almost is what it feels like to me, you know?
Fantasy monster horror. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, horror is a big
big
genre umbrella.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
But this episode for me is, I think, the hardest one for me to watch. I think this is the most like horrifying episode of Buffy, as far as like that thing about horror that makes me not want to watch it. You know, watching people suffer, watching people scream for their lives, even Warren. Like, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for Warren. You know, he is horrifying in a very different way, and has been making me feel gross and greasy and uncomfortable this entire run through, you know? But seeing anyone screaming in pain, begging for their life, and the flaying is also, not great. Although why she left his pants on, is that a discussion that we can have?
I mean, we can have that discussion. I mean, what are you wearing? No skin and pants. Like, that's just
no skin and pants. It's like the cartoon characters that have just the pants on. It's like, I don't know, like I don't.
Or the no pants, but then when their shirt is removed, they cover their lower extremity. It's fascinating. Anyway.
Yeah, our relationship with clothing is weird. And like, I understand that we're on primetime TV and that there are certain restrictions. Why not just do the shot from the waist up the way they do during sex scenes? Why do we have to have his pants on? Why are we preserving Warren's dignity in this particular moment?
I don't think it's about dignity. I mean, yes, it kind of is.
Well, I think it's about standards and practices.
Yeah.
But it just feels like such a weird choice.
For whatever reason, it doesn't set off my like that's a weird choice radar. I think
it always feels his pants are so they're not even like dirty or ripped or bloody. He has these perfectly pristine pants on with
like
the belt buckle.
Yeah, with like a crease down the front. Yeah. And for whatever reason, it works for me. And I don't know. I'm just unpacking this like live as we have this discussion. I wonder if it's because he is this like almost a like a centaur kind of human demon monster at this point.
Yeah.
That the pants make him the pants sort of keep him. This is so cheesy, which is a word that I don't like to use, but here we go. Like the pants sort of keep him grounded in the world of like human not humanity, because I'm gonna argue in a couple minutes that he is not a human at this point. The pants. This is why I do this. The pants are. He is still of the world. He is still of the human world, even as he is, I think, rightfully skinned alive for his truly his
horrible
evilness.
transgression.
I mean, he's I don't know.
I mean, he's the worst monster out of all the monsters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he really is.
I mean, at least Glory didn't care that she did damage to other people, but that wasn't particularly her thing. Like, she just wanted to go home. She was, but like, with him.
Warren likes it.
Warren
he enjoys what he does. And that is part of what makes him the monster creepy. That he is.
Super creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And also, like, you had a note about guns and money, and I'm really interested in kind of thinking about how that relates with the world of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, well, it's an odd thing. I mean, we've talked a lot in a lot of different ways about how the trio doesn't really work in the Buffyverse because there's nothing really for Buffy to do about them and all of that, and how they get their power in these really unfair sort of ways. I just think it's interesting that in this episode, we hear all along that the trio is into money. Money is kind of their thing. But in this episode in particular, I mean, we see Warren offer cash to Rack. And Warren, we hear, gets to Rax by bribing someone with cash.
Yes.
And Warren has bragged about how he killed the Slayer with a gun and how great guns are, until the demons correct him about that. You still got to be a good shot.
Yes.
And I just don't, it's this like really mundane, like these really mundane symbols of power that are often abused. And those are so connected with the trio and with Warren in particular. And this is the season where money becomes an issue for Buffy for the first time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like there's something there.
Yeah, I think that there has been all through season 6 this like uncomfortable pairing, of like we're moving mundane world things into this space, which has been, very highly fantasy. We did this for the first time, I think, in season 4 with the Initiative, and it didn't really work well then. And it's not really working that great now. There's a lot of great stuff that I love in season 6, but what it does within the world, how uncomfortably the world sits in this space. Like we were just talking about how Buffy's like, well, Warren's a human, right? So we let humans deal with Warren. We have a system for that, blah, blah, blah. All right. So why did we not call the police on Warren and his buddies before? Why did we not, if the police are the ones, if the human justice system, and the human justice system in the real world has very, very serious problems, so like but let's just say in this fantasy world, there's a fantasy justice system that actually does dispense justice, right? Shouldn't the police have been involved? Shouldn't that be something as soon as these guys were doing illegal things that Buffy should have turned them into the police way before then?
Yeah. I mean,
if that was the police's job, right?
Yeah, if that's their
but
job.
Instead,
I mean,
yeah.
Especially when Katrina dies. We
Yeah.
have the moment of Buffy when Buffy thinks that she has killed Katrina and she's going to turn herself into the police. We have that whole situation. But when the truth is revealed,
right, because this is not the first murder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why have they not, because I mean, an anonymous tip to the police saying there is this, you found this body, this woman was killed by these guys. Go check it out. Like, this is what the police should have been doing. Then again, here's another question. Both Jonathan and Andrew have been using demons and magic throughout. Does that take away their I'm human, I get a pass to the regular justice system card?
I mean, arguably, yes.
Right?
Arguably, it does. I mean, I've got a whole thing about Warren and that, and we can skip ahead to that if you want to.
Let's go ahead and skip right into it.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, all right. So let's talk about Warren for a second.
All right.
Let's talk about Warren. So we have this whole, he's a human. The Slayer doesn't kill humans. Great. We get that. But I would argue that certainly by the end of this episode, he no longer falls into the human category. And I think it's textual in some really interesting ways. So Warren goes into a demon bar and he sits down next to a vampire who doesn't bite him.
Yeah.
No one in that demon bar bats an eye. No one seems to even register that there's a human here. So what is protecting Warren in this demon bar?
Interesting question.
I mean, other than his colossal ego, right? Because he is a person who is certain that he belongs anywhere he decides to be, right?
Right.
But also he has made himself one of the demons. He literally says, "This town is ours."
Right.
He has textually aligned himself with the demons in the bar, and they're not hurting him because they also see him as one of them.
Well, there is the one who says, I was going to eat you, but now I want to watch the Slayer kill you.
Well, exactly. I mean, they assume he's one of them to the point that they assume that the Slayer is going to be coming for Warren. We know that's not true because we know how Slayers work. And whether or not the demons know about Slayers not killing humans is irrelevant. They accept Warren as one of them, as someone who the Slayer would be coming after. It's really, really interesting. Warren, so when he's doing his macho shithead posturing at the bar, he poo-poos magic. But then he goes to Rack for magical protection and weaponry. And he cuts in line, which is where I call it. Because, dude, that is 100% evil. You don't fucking cut in line. Whatever.
Yes.
But he tells Rack, I did us all a favor.
Yeah.
And then again, when he's talking about the trio, he says, we were evil. We were evil. I love Rack, by the way. Just not even being the tiniest bit impressed. What were you, a band or something? He's just not. Because
the thing is, though, that Rack knows. He knows everything. He knows that Willow's after him. He knows he can sense the magic and all this kind of stuff. So the fact that Rack can sense everything that's happening and has no radar for Warren. Makes Warren even smaller. You know, Warren is he's a Dunning-Kruger villain, right? He thinks he's really, really good, but in reality, you know,
I love that Rack knows exactly what's going to happen to Warren.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Knows exactly what's going to happen to him. But Warren says, I still have a few tricks up my sleeve, but it's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So Warren is using magic and willing to engage with it, but he doesn't have the intuition that Rack mentions because Warren doesn't feel Willow in the way that Rack does.
Well, Warren, I think, is using stolen magic, though, right? Because he's the tech guy. He's the guy who makes the robots and, you know, puts together but it was Jonathan that handled the magic and Andrew that handled the demons.
Sure.
So any tricks he has, I would presume, are stolen from Jonathan and Andrew.
Sure. I mean, I think that's probably really, really
so,
accurate.
I mean, so he has nothing.
But I mean,
everything that he has is stolen or borrowed or there's nothing
except his
unearned
own scientific knowledge.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because Warren is brilliant in that way.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Warren is a brilliant scientist in the way that Willow is a brilliant scientist.
Yeah.
He's able to do things that no one else is able to do. But he is still, whether the magic is stolen or not, he's still tapped in enough to magic.
Right.
To be engaging with it. But he can't really access it because he doesn't have, as Rack says, he doesn't have intuition.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think we might be using intuition and empathy interchangeably here.
Ooh,
at least for a little bit.
Yeah.
Which kind of tracks, right? Because Warren has no empathy. He has zero much empathy. And that feels like a pretty strong argument against Warren's humanity to me.
Yeah.
Because even tied up in the forest and confronted with a vision of his dead ex-girlfriend, Warren is incapable of feeling for another human being.
Mm-hmm.
He's still threatening Willow with violence and using rape culture rhetoric against her as he's tied up. So, I mean, we have, the gross misogyny of Warren. I mean, we could go around that mulberry bush again, right? But even tied up, you know, I mean, we have an axe wound, right? Which I'm choosing to read as a misogynistic joke, followed by mocking Willow for asking for it. He's just like, he has no sense of being held accountable for anything. And then he tells Katrina that she deserved what happened to her. And he fucking means it.
And calls her it.
Yeah. Which
is additionally, like, just when you think Warren can't be more disgusting and offensive, he actually tops himself.
Yeah.
Like being confronted with, while he's tied up.
Yeah.
Being confronted with the woman that he murdered and referring to her as it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. I mean, he's like the colossal lack of empathy. I mean, it just keeps building on itself. Yeah. It just keeps snowballing. But one of the strongest pieces of textual evidence for Warren's lack of humanity is the robot, is the Warren robot, I think.
Yeah.
Because the robot fools magical Willow because she felt his essence, right? And part of that could be Rack's magic.
Yeah.
You know, he's hiding his Warrenness in the robot somewhere, however that might work. But with as much emphasis as we're putting on intuition, empathy, and the ability to feel someone, because Anya also talks about being able to feel Willow, right?
Yeah.
Rack can feel Willow. Anya can feel Willow. I think the robotness of the robot fools Willow, even with all of her power, because the robot feels like Warren. So, put another way, Warren, human Warren, feels like a robot on an energetic level.
Well, yeah, to have that lack of empathy.
Yeah.
You know, you would have to be.
Yeah.
You know, like there would have to be, there's something in his, like in that moment where he finds out that he didn't kill Buffy, but he murdered somebody else randomly.
Yeah.
And then says it wasn't personal. Like that makes it okay.
Right.
Like that's, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't mean to kill Tara. Well, then everything's fine.
Yeah.
I'll let you go and will not flay you down
No
to
big
your
deal.
pants.
No
Yes,
big deal,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. So I mean, like he is essentially broken on that human level. And the thing that I find really interesting too is that we saw that all the way back in I Was Made to Love You, where Warren first appears. And in that, he's just this, you know, like doofy, stupid scientist who made this robot and it got out of hand, which is something that you could, you know, have a little bit of empathy for.
Yeah.
Except when Katrina says, "Hey, what's going on?" and he says, "Shut up, Katrina."
Yeah.
Like the way that he says that to her, the way that he speaks to her,
Yep.
is horrifying.
Yeah.
You know, and that is a sense that has a sense of that like complete lack of any compassion, any feeling, any, you know, responsibility,
Yeah.
you know, for anything that he does. It's all, he doesn't feel guilt. He doesn't feel bad about anything that he does. I mean, Jonathan and Andrew, and we'll talk about them in a little bit, at least, you know, they feel bad when Katrina's dead. You know, Andrew cries. Jonathan's horrified.
Yeah. And they're going through things in their own way.
Yeah.
Like they have the capacity to feel in a way that Warren doesn't seem to, or has chosen not to.
Yeah.
Right? Because, I mean, Buffy is right in that there are systems in place, ostensibly, to deal with people like Warren. But Warren has put himself outside of those systems. He is literally asking to be seen and dealt with as evil.
Right.
And he has shown over and over and over again that he will kill and he won't feel bad about it.
Right.
I mean, and Willow...
But he's still a natural, right? But is it because yes, the damage that he does is like evil, similar to the way that demons are evil. Demons are metaphors.
Sure.
Right? And this is where we get that problem, like that uncomfortable space in the world where it feels like the world is breaking a little bit. Warren is a demon as far as like the metaphor goes, because all these demons that are evil and awful are metaphors for human evil. They're metaphors for the things that we do to each other, right? But we're able to separate out, and that's the value of a metaphor, is it allows us to separate out things that we otherwise cannot separate out. We cannot look at somebody who's evil and not recognize that it is human evil, right? Here we're able to separate that out. And so it's easy to kill demons. We got no problem dusting vampires, right? It's fine. But when it comes to killing humans, that becomes a different discussion altogether. But here we have Warren apparently trying as hard as possible to turn in his human card, right? And I think that this is where we get like that tension between the world building and what we're actually doing here. Because for all intents and purposes, you know, when you get the latex out of the way, you get the metaphor out of the way, there is no difference between Warren and the evilest of evil demons. And yet we draw that line very clearly in this season. And I think it's an interesting question. Philosophically, I think it's an interesting space to play in, but I feel like we miss something because the metaphor exists for exactly this, for dealing with exactly this kind of evil. And then we bring this evil in and we take the metaphor away. And that does something in the world that makes it feel like it's not working right.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because he's all season long, like we've been sort of grappling with this, like the capacity of human beings to harm, you know, kind of alongside the capacity of demons to do the right thing. And it's, I don't know. I think Warren gets exactly the justice that he deserves, in that it is what he's asking for, in the sense of asking to be part of, the crowd at the demon bar.
Right.
He wants this world that he's building. And when Willow gives him a chance to speak, what he has to say is so disingenuous.
Yeah.
Like, his whole argument is just, I don't want to die, which, fair, but she gives him an opportunity to, like, wake up and see what he's done and maybe tap back into that humanity. I mean, she gives him more than enough opportunity to acknowledge what he's done, and he tells the vision of Katrina that she deserved what he did to her.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, I have no problem with what happens to Warren in this episode. I'm totally here for it. Not just because he strikes Willow in the back with an axe, and he has no way of knowing when he does that axe blow is not going to kill her. Murder in self-defense is legit. Like, that, what he gets, I think, is, I mean, for my money, is fair and fine and exactly what he deserves. And I don't appreciate the show positioning this as, oh, we should feel bad for this dude. Or that what Willow is doing is somehow wrong. I don't know.
But what Willow's doing, I don't know, like, I read the show as saying that what Willow's doing is wrong because it hurts Willow, not because this isn't justice.
I don't think
not because
this
isn't
hurt Willow yet.
Well, I think that it does.
I don't think it
eventually
hurts.
We see how.
I don't think it hurts
Warren,
her yet. I think if she had just killed Warren, and then realized, oh shit, I don't actually feel better.
Right.
Like, I was gonna exact some vengeance. I was gonna do some justice, and then I was gonna feel better. And then
but we do. That's what we get, though, because that's why she tries to destroy the world, because she doesn't feel better.
Right. So I'm saying that I think if she had been able to pause there and grapple with I did the right thing and I'm still in pain. It's a different story, right? It's not the story that we're telling. Right. It's a different story. But I think if she had paused there, I don't think she would be destroyed by taking Warren's life. I really don't. Because Willow at this point is more than human also. Warren is more than, or less than human. That's not right. Warren is something other than human in that he has given up his humanity in order to create a different world for himself.
Yes.
Willow is more than human in that she literally is. I mean, she calls on a god, like, first thing, like, no big deal. like in her bedroom, like, casual.
He's on her speed dial. Yeah.
Casual. It's not a big deal for Willow, too. Like, that's the thing. Willow has taken on gods before. And then we're told, so she calls on a god.
She was the only one who was able to make Glory even pause.
Oh my God. Right? Like, hello.
Yeah.
But then we're told, nope, doesn't work like that. This is a natural passing, a human death by human means. But how is a human weapon natural?
Well, that's the question that she asked.
Yeah.
How is this a natural death?
Yeah.
But it's human nature, human weapons.
Apparently.
This is what humans do.
But Willow doesn't accept that premise, right? I mean, partly because she's experiencing the shock of grief, but also because Willow has a different perspective when it comes to what's natural and what's not. I mean, she's a witch and she's a scientist. She has seen things and experienced things that no one in her life could even begin to imagine. She's encountered herself as a vampire. Like, seriously, she's encountered herself as a vampire and then is like, fine, apparently. Like, there's no, not to mention, she pulls Buffy out of heaven. Okay? Like, magically hacked into heaven. And, you hack into heaven, your worldview changes. It
I
can't
imagine
not
that it would.
change. Willow probably has a better sense of what's natural than this god face because she's lived both a mundane human life and a magical one. And her screaming back at it actually makes it back down.
Yeah.
When she cries no, the god creature reacts as though it's in pain or it's been defeated. She seems to actually hurl something energetically at it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a thing that Willow consistently does. She takes on gods and wins.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't think killing some misogynist who deserves it could destroy Willow. I really do. I don't buy it.
Interesting. But can it destroy the human part of Willow? I mean, the part of her that is, you know, like the human experience. And here's a question, though, for you.
Okay.
Like, we have made Warren absolutely, like, beyond the pale. Nobody cares about Warren. Nobody sympathizes with Warren. Nobody likes Warren. Like, nobody
Except
feels
for
bad
Andrew.
when Warren dies. That's
for
another
Andrew.
thing. Andrew's caught up in that narrative, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. What if in this scene, what if Warren had expressed regret and remorse, and if he had said, seeing Katrina had torn him up? What if all of that had happened and we had seen what it is that creates somebody like Warren at a human level, that we had kind of rehumanized him the way you might rehydrate like a tomato or something? I don't know. But what if they had managed to do that in that scene and Willow still flayed him?
I think it's a much more compelling narrative then. I think I think then we're back to, I understand both sides of this in a way that feels interesting and noteworthy. And I mean, it's more complex, right?
You know, I think you've got an argument for where Willow is wrong. Yeah. Like, if you're looking at the ghost or the image or whatever of the woman he brutally murdered, like, as the grieving girlfriend of another woman he brutally murdered is there, while the woman he tried to murder and almost murdered, if not for magical means, is running through the forest to save his worthless fucking life, right? If we saw the human side of that darkness, what is it that creates this human darkness in people? And is there a redemption point? Like, I mean, you could also make the argument that, yeah, sure, he's sorry now that he's, you know, spread eagle on a tree with a witch after he'd thrown an axe in her back, after he'd done all this stuff. Like, but what if we had shown him being scared, being over his head, realizing what he's done, feeling bad about it on a certain level? Like, what if we had seen that, we had seen his regret, you know, and then had some sort of sense of what Willow's regret might be. And I mean, if we'd seen his regret and she backed down, that wouldn't be a good story. But if we'd seen his regret and we have everything else play out exactly as it did, I like that. Yeah. I like that a lot more.
I do too. Especially because we've been playing all along in this space, at least in Warren's mind, that he loved Katrina. Yeah. In the same way that we have this whole twisted perspective from Spike about what love means. And Spike has his definition about love being dangerous and consuming. And, you know, it's not.
What if he had loved Katrina and then, like, at Dead Things, we see him go super, super dark because he killed the person that he loved? Yeah. Like, what if we actually see some humanity from him?
It's a way more interesting story.
It would have been a way more interesting story. And I think would have justified giving us a human story within this world where evil is couched in metaphor.
Especially if we do want to continue to have that conversation about it's not as simple as human good, demon bad, right? If we wanted to do a Spike Warren sort of parallel where they're grappling with similar ideas or similar dynamics in relationships, and then what that does or how that plays out. There's a more interesting narrative here.
Warren is a piece of flat cardboard.
Maybe.
As a character, Warren is a piece of flat cardboard.
Yeah.
Like there's no nuance there. There's no depth there. There's no humanity there. And I think that there are reasons why we see him not being human, especially in this season where we're questioning the difference between human and demon. But I think that, like, especially if you put him up next to Spike is interesting because we gave his evil and his demon human qualities, human nuance, human complexity, which is something that we don't have. So there's more humanity in Spike as a character than there ever was in Warren.
Yeah.
You know, so I find it interesting. What do you think about the use of board now?
Oh my God. I was so fascinated by the choice of board now. So fascinated. Right before Willow skins Warren, she says, bored now. And that's a vampire Willowism.
Yes.
Has Willow heard her vampire self say this? I don't remember.
I don't think so. I don't think Willow was around when vampire Willow said bored now. I don't think she was.
Either. So if she hasn't heard her vampire self say this, which I actually like better as an answer, what is the implied overlap between Vampire Willow and Dark Magic Willow? And before anyone jumps all over it, I know fan service is a thing. I get it. I love that she says bored now.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. It seems to me like Willow might be accessing something that she doesn't usually get to access.
But that is an essential part of herself. Like we had that whole discussion back in Doppelgangland, right?
Yeah.
You know, about like, I'm mean and I think I'm kind of gay. And then
That's me as a
Buffy's like, the vampire version is not at all like the human version. And Angel says, well, actually. And then says, absolutely
Angel
right.
Explaining in that moment. And then Buffy shuts him up like, I will stake you right here. If you...
Exactly.
So good.
Yeah, but I mean, so we see that there are elements in Vampire Willow that are shared with human Willow, you know?
Yeah.
And so the idea that at this core of Willow, there are these qualities and that one of them is bored now.
Yeah.
Like, I like that.
Well,
I think that's very cool.
Yeah. I mean, I was geeking out about this so hard. I actually pulled my girlfriend into the discussion because she loves all things Willow. And she observed quite brilliantly, I thought, that Willow is probably bored a lot of the time, but she's too polite to say anything about it.
Oh my God, I love that.
Right?
That is brilliant.
Isn't that genius? So
yes.
She's accessing part of the truth about herself through her grief and her fury.
Oh my God, I love that.
And maybe that's part of why I love this episode so much. And this scene in particular of her torturing Warren, because powerful shit happens when women and people of marginalized genders access their anger.
Yeah.
I love it.
Oh my God.
Kinda love
I mean,
Bored
yeah.
Now.
Yeah. No, bored now is a really, really good thing. And I like that idea that powerful shit happens, right?
Yeah. But it's not really boredom, is it? I mean, it is in that I think my sweetie's right.
I cannot be bothered to give a fuck about this anymore. Right? Yeah.
I mean, I think my sweetie's right that Willow probably is bored a lot of the time. I mean, you couldn't be Willow
Very
and not
smart
be
people
bored a lot of the
often
time.
are. Right. Yeah.
But I also think that this ties in really nicely with her lack of affect, how flat she is, and how that is so much about being sad as much as it is about being angry.
Except this one moment. Yeah. Well, that grief. Yeah. Grief is overpowering, definitely. And to access your anger and your grief at the same time. And that's how it presents, I think is really interesting.
Yeah. All
right. So I love this idea of, of that being core Willow. Like that's just who she is. And it contributes to all expressions of Willow, and that the Doppelgangland Willow is part of Willow. I love all of that. I think that that's very, very cool. I'm really interested kind of in this, in the role that that Story has in this tiny little scene with Andrew and Jonathan. Because it's this tiny little thing. We have them, they're just going into jail. Andrew was talking about, Broadway Matthew Broderick versus Ferris Matthew Broderick and all of that. And Jonathan gets pulled into it for just a second, then is like, shut up, and there's something that I love that, because we have Jonathan finally, and for Jonathan, this is absolutely finally rooted in reality, right? Connected to reality. And Andrew is still hiding in the fuzzy covers of fantasy. And we see how prone they both are to getting caught up in narrative. And Andrew's incredible susceptibility to narrative is something that we're going to follow through all the way into season 7 Storyteller, which actually is a brilliant cap for that entire arc for Andrew, which I love, and which they do consistently. His susceptibility to the power of narrative is crazy pants, and it's so fun and so interesting, and I really love that about Andrew. But it's when we get to Storyteller and he finally finds his way through it, into reality, that I absolutely love. But just for a recap for people who don't follow my How Story Works podcast, where I'm talking specifically about this, story itself is just a series of events. Like, that's it. It's just what happens. But narrative is what we decide that series of events means. And narrative is always what we decide it is. And the role of a storyteller is to form the narrative into something that conveys that intended meaning. And that's why when we come across moments of narrative gaslighting, when the narrative that the storyteller rubber stamps is not in line with reality, we have to call it out, because otherwise we are susceptible to believing that that is true. And narrative is hugely, hugely seductive. It is very easy to believe things that simply are not true because the narrative tells us that it is, which is why we have to think critically. This narrative is the tool of abusers and conmen worldwide. And it is the most powerful force on earth. I'm not even kidding you with that. Here, in this moment with Jonathan and Andrew, when they're dealing with the very real consequence of their actions committed under the sway of a narrative that made what they were doing feel not really real, Andrew is still actively trying to hide inside narrative. Going to Ferris Matthew versus Broadway Matthew, we can always have an argument about the story, and for that moment, Jonathan is drawn into it, and then he pulls himself out. And I mean, Jonathan is no hero. He's the one out of all of them who should have known better all along. After the events of Superstar, should have fucking known better. And this, to me, makes him the most tragic character out of the three of them, because he had that potential to be better than this, but there's something in this interaction between them that so beautifully paints the power of narrative, and how narrative used to bend reality to one's will is the dark power, and using it to heal and inspire is the light side of that narrative power. And this is a story about the dark side of power. So this, for me, is just a nice moment. It's so short. It's such a tiny little beat, but I love it.
I love the two of them just trying to grapple with their situation through the lens of storytelling, whether it's fact or fiction. It is informed by storytelling. I mean, the thing about that scene that pulls me out and makes me bounce just so hard is that it opens with a long series of rape jokes where the joke is just rape, right? Yeah. Which, just no. Just rape in prison, as though that's the funny rape, right? Yeah, but even as Jonathan is expressing his fears about being in prison, he's telling a story. Yeah. Right? And then I think Andrew pulls him out of it by referencing prison television. I don't remember all of the references, but it's rapid fire. Yeah. That they're talking film and television even as they're grappling with the reality of their situation, and then Andrew's fantasy about their situation. But there's something in it. I mean, there's something about it that I don't like, in addition to joking about rape. Yeah. It seems like this is a very privileged position. Yes. To be able to escape into narrative that way
Mm-hmm.
or reframe the narrative that way. And I don't have a fully formed thought about that. Just that I see it. I love that Jonathan briefly gets seduced by Andrew and then is like snaps out of it, essentially. Yeah. But the whole thing, I don't know, there's something in all of that that rubs me the wrong way, and I'm not entirely sure what it is.
Well, yeah.
Beyond, beyond the sort of surface level stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can definitely understand the things that are irritating about that particular scene. And, about the fact that we're, this is funny. These guys have still contributed to, they were there for Katrina's murder. They may not know about Tara at this point. I don't know if they know that Tara got killed at this point, because they're in jail for robbing the armored car, but the fact that they are so deeply involved in something that they definitely know has murdered one woman, and yet it's still funny. These characters are still treated as, it's fun and jokes and good times when you're hanging out with Andrew and Jonathan, and it's time to maybe take what they've done seriously. Even if you can't take the characters themselves seriously, it's time to take what they've done seriously and what they've contributed to seriously. And I feel like we get a little bit of that with Jonathan, because he is at least acknowledging that this is not okay.
Yeah, especially when, Andrew is still holding a candle for Warren, and Jonathan says, oh yeah, he's a nice murderer who keeps his word or whatever. It's like, okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
understand where that narrative is broken.
Yeah.
Shine a light of reality on it. It's I completely get why that doesn't really sit that well with you. Something else in this that has never sat well with me, that has been a general season 6 thing, and specifically it's this part of the run, is Buffy and the erasure of her trauma. At this point, it feels almost like Buffy is a side character in her own show. I mentioned in a previous episode how every week I come in and make my notes about everything, and Buffy is the last thing I think about, because she is kind of hanging out and observing. The only active thing she's really done this season is, occasionally investigate the trio and have sex with Spike, which, by the way, I was all for it. Like, that, the having sex with Spike was great in a lot of ways. But I do think that we have this experience where now we've had this kind of trauma, unfolding on trauma on trauma on trauma. And Buffy seems to just get over it. There is a numbing effect of trauma that is absolutely real. But we have Buffy who doesn't seem to feel anything, and is recently, she was traumatized from being pulled out of heaven. That was a whole thing. She was going through why don't I feel anything? It's the only time I feel anything is now. I touch the fire and it freezes me, this whole thing. We've been kind of processing that numbness for her. But now we have her re-traumatized by the attack from Spike, and shot in the chest and almost died, and had to pull her sister out of a room where she'd been sitting for hours with a dead mother figure. And for fuck's sake, oh my God, this day, right?
Yeah.
And then she sits down and calmly explains what's right and wrong, and she feels more like a robot than Buffy bot, and I'd be okay with this if it felt like a deliberate choice, if at some point we were going to process all of Buffy's very real trauma and treat it like it matters, but we really don't. We just kind of see her get over it, which honestly is kind of, at least from my experience, is kind of what I expected of myself, right? That I would just be able to get over it. How long it takes to process through trauma, how consistent and persistent it is, how much it revisits you even when you think you've processed through it. You don't get over it. You work through it. You work through it all the time, every day. For the rest of your life, you are affected by that experience. And with traumatizing events in fiction, these big, huge, shocking moments, I feel very strongly that as a storyteller, you need to earn that. You want to depict a rape, fine, go ahead, but follow through with what happens to the traumatized person afterwards, with what happens, how you process it, how you work your way through it. You don't just get over these things. And here we have this rape attempt, this rape experience with Spike. And that story becomes about him going to get his soul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, we talked last time with Seeing Red when we had Anya guest about the ways in which survivors are told they need to behave post-trauma. Yeah. And I think that giving Buffy space to have an experience and move through it, maybe even off camera, but have some acknowledgement. Like there's a way to acknowledge without, I think, engaging in any sort of, well, this is the way that you have to move through trauma. And, and without it being further performance of being traumatized, right? Because I don't know that that's especially helpful, but not acknowledging at all definitely feels problematic.
I don't need it to be the big storyline, but I need it to be acknowledged. Like Buffy's been through a thing this day alone. I mean, forget everything else she's been through. This day alone, while she's still recovering from, when did Spike try to rape her? Last night? And this?
Let's see. So this episode, I think
it was the night before.
This episode picks up immediately after Seeing Red.
Yeah.
It's the morning. Buffy is, let's see, the end of Seeing Red is, it's the morning, Buffy's in the garden, Xander comes to see her. It's 24
It's the morning after.
Is it 24 hours?
I think it's
maybe.
I think it's 12 hours. I think it's the morning after.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot. And I mean, I'm not going to say, like, in my own trauma experience, I shut down the next day, I'm baking cookies and I'm like, hey, but it is a very brittle, hey, here are your cookies kind of thing. Like there's a process for that. And I feel like we have in this, in this particular instance, and what happens with this story here at the end of season 6 and moving into season 7, this whole rape experience is about Spike. It is not about
absolutely.
Buffy, and we don't deal with Buffy. That said, like, I love what they do with Spike. I hate the mislead that we get in this episode. I hate Bitch is going to see a change. We're misleaded to believe that what he's after is something that is going to hurt Buffy, or he's going to bring down a world of hurt on her. Not that he's, going into get his soul so that he never hurts her again. Like, that's not at all what we're led to believe in here. And I hate that mislead. I hate that it's just disingenuous, and I really don't like it. Also, I personally have hit my limit on this, like, men calling women bitches. We've had a lot of it with Warren this season. I'm watching through Supernatural right now. I'm in the early seasons in which Dean is absolutely terrible about that. It is a ton of misogyny in the early ages of Supernatural. I hear it gets better, but I'm still in the early seasons. So, like, my patience with that shit is definitely, like, on the ropes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even though, like, I'm annoyed that we kind of erase Buffy's trauma from these experiences and then turn it into this very deep, nuanced kind of experience for Spike as he moves forward in his arc, I do kind of love what they do.
It's interesting. This is the part of this episode that I do not like. Not because it's a mislead. I just think it drags. I just don't care. And I especially don't care because, oh my God, we get the white supremacist flute soundtrack. And
oh my God,
like,
yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. What? He just charges through some village in Africa, I guess, because... Oh my God.
Gets to Africa. It's been 12 hours. Is he on a plane that has no sunlight? Knows. He took a nighttime flight. What did he...
But he literally charges through this village with somebody speaking to him. And he says, I'm not asking permission. Like, he literally just
Yeah, no, I mean, okay, this particular scene is terrible. I like where the story goes.
With this, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the villagers don't speak English, but the cave demon does. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
The shit that pulls me out of this episode is so, like, I don't even know. It's, and it's, I mean, it's the way that Spike is shot in the scene is very beautiful, but it is so, I don't know. I don't care for it. I don't like it. I don't like the racism of it. I don't like the pacing of it. I don't like it. I don't like Spike in this episode. I think, honestly, I think once Willow reaches into the books and says that's better, I'm like, okay, cool. This is the show I'm watching now. And then,
we don't need this scene from Spike. We just need to know that he's gone. We don't need this. It shouldn't be there. There's a lot of bad things in it. Yes, absolutely.
Well, and we can show that he's gone or that he's up to something.
Well,
maybe nefarious.
Clem's at the house.
Yes.
We don't need to. I don't need the fucking mislead. The mislead drives me crazy. I don't need to think that he's up to something nefarious. The fact that I can't see him and I don't know what he's up to is going to make me worry enough. I don't need to be deliberately misled in this scene. The way that it's written, the fact that it takes place in Africa, that we've got this white man barreling through this space, which is not his. Like, all of it is not good.
We could just cut to a cave somewhere. He could just be in a cave somewhere.
I don't want to see him. I don't want to see him at all. We shouldn't be seeing him at all. This is not, like, I understand that you have a contract with James Marsters and maybe you have to use him in every episode, but it's just a bad story choice. It is a bad story choice all along. What we need is not to see him at all until we get him at the end where he's in the cave and he gets his soul back. We've already had the moment where he charges out of town on his, I'll be back Slayer, and he does his little evil whatever. That was also misleading and annoying, but fine, I'll accept that. Just cut this scene right out of it and it makes the episode better. It doesn't interrupt the flow of this episode. We're in the middle of something really, really important here, and putting Spike central to that,
I mean,
centering on Spike in the middle of a woman's story, centering on Spike in the middle of a place in the world that is not for him, that is not his. I mean, it's all bad. I mean,
you could cut him, or if we were going to go with the villains plural theme, we need more of him. Yeah. It's either less Spike or more Spike for me. Like,
I vote less Spike. I vote and me voting less Spike. I love Spike, but like, you cut him out and we're, somewhere in the back of our heads, we're like, what's Spike up to? Especially when we see Clem.
What's up with Spike?
Right? The open question about where did Spike go and what the fuck is he doing is much, much better than that.
Yeah.
Keeping it in the shadows is definitely better. I think I would kill it entirely.
Yeah, but I love Clem. I'm so glad we get Clem.
Oh my God, I love Clem. All right, well, let's visit that in a second because I want to talk about Dawn, which brings us to Clem,
right? Oh God.
Right?
Okay, Dawn in this episode.
Oh my God. Okay, Dawn comes home, finds a mother figure dead in the house.
In her mother's bedroom, no big deal.
Mother's bedroom, right? And then sits with her all day. I didn't want her to be here alone.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So Dawn's experience right here, like the fact that we're having this experience that actually does reflect quite a bit Buffy's experience in the body.
We even get a flash to white.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When Dawn sees Tara, we get that instead of a fade to black, we get a fade to white like we got in the body.
Yeah. Oh God, it's so heartbreaking. And she just sits there with her all day. And then Buffy comes and finds her and pulls her out. And they have that whole discussion. And then Dawn, and this is the thing, like, Buffy's like, well, we're going to go to the magic box. We're going to get a locator spell. We're going to find Willow, yada, yada, yada. And Dawn is like, I want to come with you.
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
Love this Dawn.
Me too.
I love all things from Dawn. I love Dawn's argument that I don't care if Warren's human, he's evil. I wish that I could kill him.
I love that so much. And then Buffy says something like, you don't really feel that way. And I'm
Yeah.
like, fuck
Don't
you.
tell her how she feels.
Like, she feels how she feels.
Exactly.
How dare you?
Exactly. I was really annoyed by that too.
I
thought it was
do
a
not
bad
like that. I
line.
am so
Mhm.
with Dawn and Xander
Mhm.
in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Dawn says, Buffy says, Buffy or maybe it's Xander says Warren's a dead man if Willow finds him. And Dawn just says, good. And I'm like,
Oh,
hell
yeah.
that is a good baby. Like, I'm just-
Exactly, because Dawn just spent the day,
Right?
Spent the day sitting with Tara's dead body.
Yeah.
Also, Dawn's trauma erasure. Let's not
Yeah.
forget, we don't really deal with that either. And then we have this moment where, she says, fine, if I can't go with you, I want to go to Spike's. And Buffy's like, okay. And here's where I'm with Xander. Xander's like, no.
Excuse me, what? Yeah.
Exactly. Like, at the same time, having been gone through shock and trauma, and again, fiction is not answerable to reality, but there are those moments where you just behave the way that you always have because that's the reference that you've got, because you haven't processed the ways in which things are different. And so sometimes that happens, but I don't think that's what we're doing here. She's like, he's strong, he can protect. There's no demons coming after Dawn. Why can't she go to Janice's? Janice is across the street. Her mother makes quesadillas. Just send her over to Janice's.
Not to mention, Dawn is telling them, I want to be with you.
Exactly.
Dawn wants to be with her people.
And going to the magic box and finding a locator spell, Buffy's like, no, it's too dangerous. I'm like, more dangerous than anything else that Dawn's been through, more dangerous than when you knocked her out and dragged her to the basement to be killed by a demon. Like, Dawn and Danger are pretty much best friends at this point.
Yeah, not to mention, Dawn loves Willow. Dawn loves Tara.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. Like, you're afraid that Willow on all of the powerful magic is going to do something and, people are going to get hurt. Like, I understand.
Right.
I understand not wanting Dawn to be around Willow, but Dawn's experience is, here are these two people, Willow and Tara, who she loves, who she cares about, and who she loves together.
Raised Dawn for a summer.
Yeah.
As her parents.
Effectively.
If anybody's going to get through to Willow, wouldn't it be Dawn?
That's something that has bugged me about this whole storyline with Willow, actually. I feel like, because I know that it's Xander who gets through to her in the end, and I kind of understand, but I feel like Dawn has a much better narrative reason.
Oh my God. Yes. Dawn, especially with her connection with Tara.
Yes. Yeah, because Dawn loves Willow, Dawn loves Tara, and Dawn loves Willow and Tara together. And Dawn was always the biggest cheerleader of Willow and Tara. So it feels right to me, especially if you are telling a story about what the loss of this one person does to Willow. Because ultimately, it's not just Willow who lost Tara, right? Everybody lost Tara.
Yeah. And Dawn being able to empathetically reach Willow with that shared loss.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been amazing if Dawn had been the one instead of Xander to make that connection. I think that would have been incredible.
Yeah.
But instead we get Buffy taking Dawn to Spike's, which is okay, whatever. But I don't care. Because Clem, in the middle of this episode that is so hard and so difficult, Clem is this shining light of sunshine with bugles and Parcheesi, and I love him so much, Noelle.
And Liverwurst. I'm just about to mix up some country time. Like, he's so great. God. He is so, so good. And just the way he says, you can have the comfy chair with the emphasis on comfy. Like,
I know.
Clem.
He's so sweet.
He's so good. Okay, the thing about Clem is one of those characters who is so much better than he needs to be. Yes. They did not need to go so hard on making Clem delightful.
Yeah.
And they did. And I'm so glad.
I'm so glad because we needed it. We needed Clem this season. We really did. Yeah. He's so sweet and so delightful. And seeing him in the middle of this episode, which is so hard for so many reasons, was such a nice break.
Yeah. Someone who's not in our character notes, but
I was just having the same thought. Anya? Yes! I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, I forgot to put my Anya notes down.
How did we not
talk about Anya?
How have we not talked about Anya yet? Good Lord.
My God. Okay, first of all, Anya post Hell's Bells is my favorite Anya of all the Anyas, except for like Wish Anya, like in the first couple of episodes before she got together with Xander. But now we have Anya. I love when Willow walks in and Willow is just business and where are the books? And Anya's trying to talk to her. Anya knows. Anya's trying to work with her. When they come in and they're like, hey, this is what's going on. And she's like, yeah, I can feel her screaming out for vengeance, but she doesn't want me.
She doesn't want me. I love so much.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a really interesting character beat for Anya, right? Because Anya in The Wish is granting a wish, but doesn't really care about what happens. Around that. She's granting a wish for Cordelia, but Cordelia is not really that important to her.
Yeah.
And now this Anya, she cares about the person who's crying out for vengeance. And she also has this respect for Willow's autonomy.
Yeah.
That I don't know if that's Anya or if that's vengeance demon rules, but regardless, I love it. Xander's like, isn't that your whole thing? Like, don't you have to go to her? She's crying out for vengeance. And Anya says she doesn't want me.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's wonderful for Anya. It's also wonderful for Willow of like, I want vengeance and I want to DIY this stuff. It's great. But, oh, goddamn, when she comes out, when Anya comes out to Xander as being... she's a vengeance demon. And he says, oh, is that like leftover from your vengeance demon days? And she just says, not leftover. And then they have that moment of almost no dialogue. And he says, when? And she says, when do you think?
Oh my God, I know. I love it so much.
It's so good.
It is so good. And I love this. I'll help, but I'm helping Willow.
Exactly.
Like, she is just there for Willow because Willow is in the middle of vengeance and this is her thing. And that's what she's doing. I love it. I love that she can track Willow. I love that we give her power, that she's not a comedy mule, finally, in this episode. God, Anya's the best.
And I think she just continues to like be excellent.
Oh, yeah. She only gets better as we go. She only gets better as we go. All right. So, Noelle, baby, what are you wearing?
Oh, boy. The makeover of the damned. We got to talk about it.
All right.
Xander describes Willow's appearance as the makeover of the damned, which is pretty funny. But it's really the makeover of the grieving.
Yeah.
Like we use the all black everything as code for she's bad now. But Willow is a sad girl more than she is a bad girl.
And black is the color of grieving too.
Yeah. Yeah. So the clothing is a deliberate change. By which I mean she needs a new shirt.
Right.
But it's not just because she needs the bloody shirt, to use to get to Warren, but also because, as you say, she's in mourning. She's not moved by I'm evil now. Right? That's Warren. That's Warren's whole thing. She's moved by the death of the one person who is supposed to be here, as she puts it.
Yeah.
So it's not just magic that changes Willow's hair and eyes. It's also grief. Because grief affects our physical bodies.
Yeah.
And we see that change in Willow even before she changes her clothes, right? We see the change in her walk and her stance.
Yep.
She hasn't sucked up the books yet. She hasn't changed her outfit, but her body is different already.
Yeah.
So grief and the accompanying fury literally changes the way Willow moves through the world. Which is so damn powerful.
Yes.
And then it gets, then we lay all of this meaning on this visual cue of she looks really, really different. But She looks really, really different, and she looks different in a way that we are encouraged to read as evil.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't start that way. And I think that's so, so fascinating. The first thing she does when she changes her clothes is go to Buffy, right? She saves Buffy. That's the first thing she does.
And she smiles.
Yeah.
When she saves Buffy, she has no affect almost throughout this whole episode.
Yeah.
But when she saves Buffy, she has this little smile for Buffy.
Yeah.
And it is such a beautiful, tiny expression of emotion, and she shuts that shit down immediately.
Well, she's so sad. She's so, so sad when she goes into the operating room, and she doesn't, she looks scary, but she doesn't hurt anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is really interesting. I'm fascinated by this, like, this decision to change the sad girl into a bad girl.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not unique to Willow. I mean, we do this all the time in media. But I think it's I don't know. I love it. I love the makeover of the Damned too. I mean, she looks great.
Yeah.
She looks fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other bit of clothing that we need to talk about is the bloody shirt, right?
Yeah. Oh God.
You
the
know,
bloody shirt.
It's rough. It's so rough. Willow using her bloody shirt as a means of finding Warren is one of my favorite things in all of Buffy.
Mm-hmm.
Tara's last words after she's shot are, "Your shirt."
Yeah.
As she notices the spray of her own blood on Willow's clothes, which, pause for a moment, peak Tara, right?
Yeah.
Her last words are in recognition of someone else and their situation.
Oh my God. Tara never lived long enough to have a moment that was about her.
Peak Tara.
Yeah.
So Willow brings the bloody shirt to Tara's dorm room at UC Sunnydale and lays it out on the floor so carefully. And we know that at least one really potent spell resulted in Willow on Tara's dorm room floor. And I'm not even being cheeky. Like, this is extremely poignant. Willow's body, Tara's room, Willow's shirt, Tara's blood. This is the last spell they do together.
Oh my God. I hadn't thought about it that way, but oh my God. Yeah. Yes.
Tara's blood is literally the thing that leads Willow to Warren.
Mm-hmm.
And my headcanon is that Tara is 100% on board with what happens to Warren.
Mm-hmm.
Warren hates all women.
Yeah.
Willow loves this one woman so deeply, and that's what destroys Warren. I think it's a perfect ending for him. I think he gets exactly what he deserves.
Absolutely. All right. So what's your favorite part?
Oh, boy. Okay. I have 3 because, of course, I do. Because I'm not going to pare it down to one favorite part for this episode. My favorite in the love to see it sense is Willow confronting Warren with the bullet.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love her torturing him with that bullet. Yeah. Favorite in the gut-wrenching sense is Dawn staying with Tara all day. I didn't want to leave her alone.
Mm-hmm.
That is so Dawn. That is so very Dawn. Connection with other people, time together. Those are her things. Like, those are her strengths.
Her love language is quality time.
Yeah. Yeah. Her love language is quality time. And it's also, so it's very, very Dawn. And it's also so very human to want to stay with the body of someone you love. Yeah. It's just beautiful. Yeah. I love that. Mm-hmm. And then my favorite part in the specifically to delight me space is when Willow magically lifts the bullet out of Buffy. She floats it in the air, closes her hand around it, and then when she opens her hand again, the bullet is gone.
Mm-hmm.
She carries that bullet in her body magically until she confronts Warren with it in the forest. And that is some deep, beautiful symbolism that I cannot even begin to express my love for.
You just made me like this episode better. I don't enjoy this episode. I like it. I think it's a good episode. I think it's good. I think it's well written. I do not enjoy it. Everything in this episode makes my heart break. It's really difficult for me. Even though Warren absolutely deserves everything that he gets, it is very hard for me to watch anybody suffer. I am the worst. I would be the worst torturer in hell. I am terrible. I would be like, let me bring you some frozen yogurt instead. I know you don't like frozen yogurt, and that is how I will choose to torture you. But yeah, that's a beautiful read. And the idea that Willow carries that bullet around in her body all day before giving it back to Warren is really beautiful and poetic. I love that read.
That's my read. I'm sticking with it.
I like it.
What's your favorite part of Villains, Lonnie?
I think what I enjoy the most, I mean, it's actually like there's a lot of really, really good stuff in it. What I enjoy the most is probably Clem, but Anya wins out. New Anya, seeing new Anya not being a comedy mule, Emma Caulfield allowed to fucking do her thing. I'll help, but I'm helping Willow. Mm-hmm. All of that stuff. I love all of that. Everything Anya in this episode, I think, is my favorite part of this episode. All right, if you enjoyed this conversation, would like to join in, connect with the show on Twitter, follow @Chipperish and use the hashtag StillPretty.
This episode of Still Pretty was brought to you by the Chipperish Media producers who support us on Patreon at the power producer level. These people are the reason why Still Pretty is coming to you free and ad-free right now, so thank you to our February producers. Stephania, Shelley, Rose, Jonathan, Alice, Kristen, Sarah, Christina, Erica, and Abigail. And this week's special message for our power producers: I got bugles and liverwurst.
I love that we have a bunch of our power producers here with us today watching us record the show live. It's so cool to say their name with them right there. All right, to find out how you too can support Chipperish Media, visit patreon.com/Chipperish. Other ways to show your support: write a great review on Apple Podcasts, tell your friends about the show, or suck all the ink out of the dark magic books. It'll be fine.
Oh, you know I would if I could.
Oh,
come on.
Man. You'd look great, too, with those dark eyes and dark hair. That'd be awesome for you.
And excuse me, but text all over my body.
Come on. All over your body? Yeah.
So important. We will be back next time with 2 to go, the 21st episode of Season 6. Until then, fine. The Puppet Master wants to drive? Go right ahead.